Good evening and welcome to Space Cities, and I'm your host Robert Perala. And Space Cities is a show about scientific phenomena, space exploration, and metaphysical and spiritual principles. And with us tonight we have the very distinguished and exciting Mr. Randolph Winters.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Robert.
And Randolph is the author of The Pleiadian Mission, A Time of Awareness. A highly touted, very exciting book here that we're seeing all over, and we've been getting phone calls and letters and people asking about our what do we know about the Pleiadian mission, and what do we know about Randolph Winters, and we finally got you on the show, and indeed it is exciting. Randolph, this is a very controversial science, extraterrestrials, UFOs, the thought of potential merge between our culture and another culture from outer space. How did you all get started in this?
Well, for me it started, I believe it was 1979, and it started much the way it does with most people. You either have a sighting or you see some pictures that grab your attention. In my case, I came into possession of some beautiful, clear daytime photos of what I believe to be extraterrestrial craft. They turned out to be pictures from Switzerland, from a little Swiss farmer named Edward Albert Meier. And the pictures had been brought over by Colonel Wendell Stevens from the Air Force. Once I saw the pictures, there was, I don't know, something kind of, snapped a little bit, and I thought, well, this looks pretty important. If human beings are really coming somewhere from way out in space, imagine what we could learn from them. And I suppose I got a little preoccupied with it for a while. Carried the pictures around, showed them to friends, like, what do you think of this sort of thing?
Right.
And, because we really are on the verge, I think, of coming in contact with the family of man and the universe. And it's a pretty exciting time, I think, here for the people of Earth.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There's changes all over in our consciousness. We seem to have much more awareness of our divinity, our mortality, spirituality. And the big question is what's the extraterrestrials doing in all of this? We've seen it foretold in the Bible, the Gita, the Torah, the Sanskrits, the Egyptian aspect. When it comes to the Pleiadians, what do we really have in the Pleiadians? What's their history? What do we know about them?
Well, the Pleiadians represent a really unique opportunity for us to find out about ourselves because they're human and they tell us that they are related to us. Apparently, we have some common ancestry with them. When Billy Meier in Switzerland began to have contacts with these ETs, when they came out of the craft, not only was he happy to find out that they were human, they looked just like us, and they live on planets very similar to ours. They live in a physical realm just like we do. And it's an opportunity for us here on Earth to come in contact with extraterrestrials on a friendly basis, because it's quite possible that many extraterrestrials out there are a little more aggressive, perhaps not as friendly toward us. After all, it's an immense universe of which we have no idea the size of, and it's quite possible that we will be coming in contact with ETs of many different types. So our first contact with the Pleiadians from this little cluster of stars called the Pleiades represents not only an opportunity for us to come in contact with the family of man and the universe, but on a friendly basis where we can learn about ourselves and perhaps re-examine ourselves from the viewpoint of a higher intelligence such as them.
Right. We see more and more the phenomena of the spacecraft coming about and showing itself in places like Mexico and Peru and certainly the United States as well. It seems more and more that with this visitation that it seems to be preparing us for something. What do you think's ahead for humanity?
Well, it's pushing us. It yanks us out of our reality. Someone may be sitting in their office, working at their job and doing their normal thing, and then all of a sudden they see on the news where there's an extraterrestrial spacecraft floating over the city of Mexico. And this wakes them up, and changes the size of your thinking, pulls you out of the box that you're normally living in.
Right.
And that's what's really happening to us as a society. The idea that extraterrestrials are coming here and that they are going to force us all to wake up and see ourselves in a different light, because extraterrestrials are far more advanced than we are technically and spiritually. Their understanding of us and of life is quite different. So it represents an opportunity for us to slow down with a very open mind and re-examine ourselves and say, what the heck is life? And,
right.
What's out there beyond? We've all watched Star Trek and watched Scotty and the boys zoom out into space to the final frontier, but I don't think it is the final frontier. It might be the final physical frontier, but it's also probably just the beginning of the non-physical spiritual frontier,
right,
where we're just beginning to understand ourselves in a different light. Just maybe there's more to life than the physical.
Right. Well, more and more it seems like we're being prepared to be made a part of the big picture. And I think with all these visitations, that denotes that more than anything else. The exciting thing, I think, is when you met Billy Meiers in Switzerland, and the people of this planet have always wondered and fantasized about the ultimate visitation, physically being able to step aboard a craft and step into another reality, and being able to show perhaps the various facets and the mysteries of the universe and how it evolved as well as humanity. Tell us a little bit about how Billy Meiers came into all of this and then later met up with Semyosi, the Pleiadian cosmonaut.
Well, for Billy, he believes it started at birth. He believes that the extraterrestrials caused him to be born on purpose, and that his spirit was on the other side, what we commonly think of as heaven, that the extraterrestrials caused him to be born. They actually pulled him and 3 other spirits into physical life, 1937, February 3rd at 11:20 in the morning. Later on, he was chosen to be the physical contact person. The other 3 individuals that they had pulled into life were to be kind of telepathic backups, a support team more or less for him. At the age of 5, he had his first contacts. At the age of 7, he was up in the craft. They were already educating him and preparing him for a whole life as a contactee. So Billy's had a very unusual life, much different than the rest of us. His entire life is devoted to being a contact person. He says that, well, and it's understandable. You know, most of us go to school, you know, we get cars and go to class and do what we do, play on the football team or whatever we do, you know, in our normal course of events. Billy hasn't done any of that. His life has gone an entirely different path. He lived in a small village in Switzerland called Bulach. His educational years were much different. He hardly went to school. For the most part, he has no formal education. He was having contacts at these early ages, going aboard the craft. Imagine if you were 7 years old and telepathically a voice came into your head and encouraged you to come out into the forest to a remote area. You walk out there, you're not afraid, it all seems very familiar to you. A craft comes down, someone steps out, beckons you to come with them, go aboard the craft. Once inside the craft, you have this very comfortable feeling that you've been there before. Somehow it's all part of an ongoing part of your normal life. Billy says his entire life has felt like that, that it's just part of a series of lifetimes that he's had as a contact person. Aboard the craft, they'll take him out into space, take him to different parts of the universe, answer his questions. It seemed to be important when he got his education from the Pleiadians that he have first-hand knowledge so that he had, you know, the answers to the questions himself. You know, it's one thing for us to read books, talk among ourselves, hear information from each other, but it's most important that we have our own experience, that we learn to find truth for ourselves and we have our own truths. This is the only way we can really learn to become responsible for ourselves, responsible for our own growth, and for our own persona. So Billy had some amazing experiences and spent a lifetime aboard crafts, becoming educated, seeing different parts of the universe. So quite different than the rest of us.
What do we know exactly about the Pleiadian cosmonaut that had taken him into the Pleiades, Semyosi, the female?
We don't, excuse me, we don't know too much about her. His first contact with her was in January 1975, and up until that time, he did not know her at all and was not expecting her. He had just been warned years before that he would have contacts with these beings from the Pleiades. When the craft landed, Billy actually got up and tried to walk to the craft. He was walking towards it, and he said he was suddenly arrested by some unseen force. He couldn't get completely to the craft. They seemed to have protective screens of some type around them. So he just went over and, excuse me, sat down underneath a tree and waited. And this lady stepped out from behind the ship, walked over to him, introduced herself as Semyosi, that she had just flown there from the Pleiades and it had taken her about 7 hours to get there. And Billy made some comical remark, well, gee, that's a long time to be cooped up in that little metal box you came in. And they had a couple of laughs about, yeah, that's a long time to be in such a small little thing. And she says, normally they don't fly those long distances in these crafts, but for her, she had to come from the home planets that day.
Right.
And Billy says, what's life like on your home planets? She says, well, it's very similar to here. Actually, our planet looks very similar to Earth. It's a water planet, lots of mountain ranges and so forth. And she likes Switzerland a lot. And we've often wondered if maybe that isn't why they picked Billy, you know, because of the terrain.
Right.
But she says their home planet is about the same size and very similar to here, except they don't have large cities. They live a little differently than we do. they've advanced a lot farther. You know, they've lived a lot more lifetimes, so they've learned a lot more about nature and the spiritual ways of things, and they seem to live a far more peaceful life than we do. Their entire culture and society is based on more of a wisdom system, where you find somebody really good at something and you put them in charge of it because they know what they're doing. There's no politics, there's no government, there's no money, there's no elite power groups, no wealthy families and bankers, and all the things that we have here on Earth that control our,
It's a cooperation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine if we here on Earth just take anything like education and say, well, let's go find 12 wise people who really understand education, and let's put them in charge of it.
Yeah.
And let's don't have it anything to do with economics.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just do whatever it takes, whatever is necessary to raise our people with the best education possible, based on wisdom.
Right.
Well, we don't do that now. It's all based on economics and bankers.
Sure.
If they don't give us the money, then we cut the budget and no more teachers and out with the textbooks or whatever. So they live in a totally different type of environment than we do. So perhaps it can serve as kind of a role model for us to kind of, for us to get our own act together.
Right. Well, all that can be found right here in the Pleiadian Mission, and that's in all of your bookstores near you, A Time of Awareness, and it certainly is. I've been looking through this book now for a number of weeks, and to tell you the truth, it's turned out to be one of my favorite books, too. And there's a few things that come to mind here. When we talk about the Pleiades themselves, the Bible refers to them as the seven sisters. We refer to them in a number of different ways, but specifically there are the seven central suns. And around that revolves around roughly how many planets in the Pleiades?
The star chart has changed. I think we started charting the Pleiades in the 1500s in France, and at that point I think they came up with about 250 approximately. I don't remember exactly. And I think at this point, because of advancements with telescopes, that we are probably over 2,400 planets right now in the Pleiades, we believe. When we look at them, you can see them. Many of you probably follow the Pleiades in the winter months. Depending on where you live on the planet, in the winter months in the northern hemisphere, you can usually see them in the evening. And there's generally 6 stars visible to the eye. They're thought of as the 7 stars, but apparently we can't see them as well. Maybe that's just because our air is getting so bad we can't see them anymore. But years ago they could see 7, now we see 6. So, there's a great Indian story about the Pleiades. You referred to many of the other writings, and they've shown up all over the place in the Quran and the Bible. There's a lot of references to the Pleiades being the home of human life. But I think the Kiowa Indians have the really nicest story. They refer you're familiar in Wyoming, there's the Devil's Tower that we all saw in Close Encounters, and the backside of it looks like some big animal has clawed it all down.
Exactly.
Well, the Kiowa Indians tell the story that there were 7 young maidens running from a bear. And that they were running away from it, and the spirit told them, don't look back, don't look at the bear, and you'll be safe, that you'll be saved by the Great Spirit. And as they were running towards Devil's Tower trying to get away, one little Indian girl looked back at the big fierce bear that was chasing them, and that's the 7th star that we can't see up there. And as the others, as they ran away, the Great Spirit in the sky pulled them up and saved them, and the bear, in an attempt to grab the little girls as they ran away, clawed at the mountain range, and that's the bear claw on the back of Devil's Tower. And so the Kiowa Indians believe that the Great Spirit in the sky, which is from the Pleiades, saved their little girls and is their guiding spirit.
Yeah. It's interesting that in the Bible specifically, it says you are descendants of the sons of the Pleiades, and when I examined that a little bit further over a period of time, I found out that they were really talking about a declaration on the sky. I know that I've spoken with a number of conservatives, and I say, what do you think that means, that you're descendants of the sons of Pleiades? And somebody said, well, I think that must have been an area near Damascus or something at the time. And I said, no, I think what they were trying to tell us is that they were talking about a declaration on the sky, that in fact man's stellar heritage is really coming from the stars. It also makes other references that you are sons of Sirius and sons of Arcturus.
Well, I have that in the book. I was very interested in the history of the Pleiadians and how it may fit into how we got here. In the book, I have a whole chapter devoted to just the chronology of history and of man. And the Pleiadians explain that long ago, about 22 million years ago, in the Lyra section of the sky, there was a race of humans that came to Earth. And that was the first time that the Illyrians came here and brought the white race to Earth. That Earth naturally developed a life on its own, but that was the brown skin race. Later on, several million years on down the road, other races begin to come here also. And over the last 300,000 years, we've had races from many different areas come here. The Pleiadians spun off from the Lyrians about 230,000 years back and found their own little cluster of stars there to build their planets in. At that same time period, many other people from Lyra spun off and went to Orion, Hyades, Andromeda, and other areas. So we have human life really all over our galaxy, and it all seems to go back to the constellation Lyra as near as they can tell. So primarily we're all kind of like one big family from this Lyra constellation. The Lyrans, or Lyrians as some people pronounce it, have for the most part destroyed themselves. They still exist, but there's apparently only a couple of planets left, and they're peaceful now, fortunately. But the Pleiadians that are coming to visit us here today are descendants of these Lyrans and talk about that terrible history. But now it's giving us a view into how we all wound up here. Because we have such a mixture of races and colors, and most importantly, we have such a mixture of levels of evolution here on Earth. Some of us have lived a lot of lifetimes, some people have lived only a few lifetimes, and that contributes to our problems here on the planet. It makes it very difficult for us all to get along. It's just like going to school. If you have someone who's already been educated in the 12th grade or something, it's very hard for them to hang around with people with far lesser education. So I think we're learning a lot, not only about our history and how we got here, but a little bit about why we're having so much trouble getting along here.
Right. You stated also in your book, as far as the evolutionary process of mankind and the Pleiadian involvement, that there is another true testament to Emmanuel, who was later, of course, called Jesus Christ. That's very exciting. What's that about?
Oh, gee, I mentioned earlier that Billy had the opportunity to travel on the crafts many times. And it was, I believe he was 19. It was in 1956. He had the opportunity, at the request of the ETs that were teaching him, to go back in time and actually see some of our historic moments. Well, Billy was very fascinated with the idea of learning more about Jesus, or Emmanuel is what his real name was. And so the extraterrestrials that he was having contacts with at the time says, well, you need to see for yourself. So they have a technical ability somehow to move the crafts in time. Billy said he went aboard the craft. The craft somehow moved away from Earth, and it moved far enough away that Earth appeared just like a small ball, much like we see the moon now. And when they were a distance away from the moon, suddenly the craft raced back in towards Earth, and when they came back into Earth, time had changed, and they were back approximately 2,000 years. Actually, it was 4 days before the time of the crucifixion. Billy says they left the ship. They spent 4 days on foot, walking around the area and learning and becoming educated. And on the last day, he had the opportunity, he said, to stop alongside the road and for 20 minutes talk to Emmanuel.
Wow.
Now this sounds incredible. It sounds like something out of a fantasy comic book, and because of the levity with which we treat the life of Emmanuel, or Jesus Christ as most people call him, it sounds like an astounding thing that's going to make most people squirm in their seats and go,
right.
Oh no, this couldn't be, this has to be
Right.
really crazy. But keep this show, because 50 years from now, when time travel is very common and we're doing things like that, people will be scratching their head going, well, of course, why not? Well, Billy had the opportunity for 20 minutes to talk to Emmanuel. How it was done technically, we don't understand yet, but he has that entire conversation all written down word for word. They recorded
Really?
it for him. And when you read it, it's just phenomenal. To begin with, as soon as he was approached by Emmanuel, who had tremendous spiritual powers about
Right.
him, walked right up and introduced himself to Eddie, as he called him then. His nickname when he was a boy was Eddie. And says, welcome, Eddie, and took his hand and says, sit down over here. We don't have much time, and I know what you came for, and I know your questions that you're seeking here, so let's get right to it. And Eddie, as he was called then, was a little taken back because the man just seemed to know his thoughts very play-like, and they got right to it. And he says, you've come here curious about my life, wanting to know if it was real and what my teachings were about. They had this conversation that goes on, and just a few minutes into the conversation, Eddie says to Emmanuel, he says, there's kind of a sadness about you that I didn't expect to find. I can understand after meeting you why you are so revered and put in such a high place, because you're obviously a person of such great spiritual development. But what is this unique sadness about you that I seem to sense? And Emmanuel was a little taken that someone would notice that. He was a little surprised. And he says, with all of the great knowledges that I have, and with all the things that my father has taught me and the other celestial sons and daughters that have come here, he says, I have immense spiritual knowledges about the universe and about life. But it's very, very difficult for him because he could spend an entire afternoon explaining these concepts to, say, a group of people and come back the next day and they got it all messed up. They couldn't understand it. So it was very frustrating for him as a teacher and as obviously as a humanitarian that he was not able to communicate and be of greater benefit to the people that he was trying to serve. And this was kind of a sad thing in him. And Billy says, well, Billy was reluctant to talk about the crucifixion. He wasn't sure if he knew about it because we're one day before the event was going to happen, before he was going to be caught at Mount Olives. And so he kind of cautiously says, are you aware of the future events in your life? And Emmanuel just, oh yes, I'm very aware of things. He says, the gift of seeing the future is one of my stronger ones. And he says, I've always known my whole life in its entirety. I know why I'm here. As a matter of fact, 3 days ago I had a few rather important moments alone with myself trying to decide whether or not to go on with the events of the next few days because I know they're going to be very, very difficult for me. But he says, yes, I'm aware of the crucifixion and what's going to happen and all the events that are going to take place, but it needs to happen in history to pull people together. He says, you have no idea how spiritually lost people are in this time. You can go to every street corner and everybody has a different view of what life is. He says, at least the events that are going to happen to me in the near future will serve to pull people together, give them some common ground, and give them some spiritual direction which will feed them. So he was very concerned about all of that and decided he knew that it was going to have to happen. It was going to have to go forward with it. So he was sitting right there telling Eddie that, yes, this event has to go down and I have to get up from this place after I talk to you and walk into that area and let the future happen.
Without a doubt, when it comes to Billy Meier's in this book, it really, I couldn't help but thinking these were startling and intelligent wisdoms from a man who obviously has had a very deep-rooted spiritual connection and a physical connection with the phenomenon of unprecedented proportions. You lived with Billy for how long here?
Well, I made 3 trips over there. I just stayed for a while, went back and forth, and in the summer of '87, I had him to myself. I showed up in May, and there was hardly anybody else at the house, and he was there, and we had nothing to do, so I had him all to myself all summer.
Wow.
So that was a great time for me. He'd wake me up in the morning, he'd come out of the house, and he prepared a little van for me that was behind the house. So he'd come out in the morning and call my name and wake me up, and I'd get up and we'd go have a little breakfast and spend the day together. So it was an exciting time for me to grow and to learn and to discover all these things. And I found out that he'd had so many experiences that we didn't know anything about. We've all seen some of his photos, of which we're going to see a little bit later on. And, but I did not realize when I met him the depth of experiences that he'd really had. That here's a man who's been out into the universe.
Right.
He has seen other civilizations. He's watched war on other worlds. He's been aboard giant motherships where he's met beings that are human and non-human. And he's had the kind of experiences that most of us are only dreaming about or only seeing in the movies. And now he's sitting in Switzerland on the top of a hill, feeling like he's pretty much done his job for this lifetime, just kind of talking to the birds and waiting for it to end.
Right. Well, I think without a doubt, Billy Meier is probably the definitive Earthman that has met extraterrestrials, recorded information, taken photographs, been able to transcend the time-space continuum, and been able to come back and tell us about it. I think in a lot of ways, isn't that every childhood fantasy to be able to witness such an event like that?
I think it is. Most of us dream that something like that would happen to us, but you know, in ufology, we're always looking for people that have these kind of experiences. So far, Billy Meier is the only one that we know of that has had such extensive contacts, that it went on for years, that he was given so much information, that he has so many photos and so many films. And there's even a peach tree in front of his house, Robert, that he brought back from a Pleiadian world. And this, he has seeds for lettuce and other things that are in his garden. But if you walk up to Billy Meier's house, if you should get there anytime, there's a peach tree right in front of the front door, and go grab yourself a peach. It's from the Pleiades.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you asked for it here on KMVT Channel 6 in Space Cities. Let's take a look at some of the most astonishing photographs I think I've ever seen.
These first photos are all taken by Billy Meier, and they were all shot in 1975 and 1976. And they are shot in the area of, in Switzerland where he lives, in a little place called Schmidrudi. It's about 45 minutes east of Zurich. The first picture you're looking at is of a Pleiadian beam ship. They're called beam ships because one of the propulsion systems is a light emitting system. And these crafts are 21 feet in diameter. They can carry 3 people in them. And they are solid, they are metal. I should reiterate again that the Pleiadians are human, they're physical just like we are. Every time Billy took pictures, and obviously the crafts here are posing because they're quite close, broad daylight, and they're letting them take the pictures. Typically, Billy would take sometimes 2, 3 rolls of film within minutes whenever he would have a contact. They would direct him to a contact site and then let him take the photos first before they would land. So in Meier's photo collection, we have sometimes 30, 40, 50 pictures, all right in a series, all very similar. So it was very easy for investigators to put them all together and go trace the events of the contact. Here's one of the few photos that we have left of the craft on the ground. Billy, living out in the country, after he'd take the pictures, would you believe he would mail order his film? He'd send it into Zurich to a film developing lab, and they'd wait a week or so, they'd develop the pictures and send them back to him. And all went well the first 3 or 4 months, and he was having no problems at all. But after a few months, most of the agencies, you know, piqued their interest. They started going through the mail and getting some of the pictures out. So we lost a lot of them, and we lost most of the ones on the ground, which of course are the more fascinating ones. But here is a Pleiadian beam ship sitting on the ground. Quite a few of the contacts, Semyazi, his Pleiadian contact person, would actually get out of the craft and sit down on the ground and they would talk. In most cases, Billy would have like a list of questions prepared, either by himself or the people around him. I think that was a large Pleiadian person passing
Yeah, we
through the
just
time
saw,
zone.
we've had alien contact.
Alien, we've had a contact right there. Here's a little closer shot of the craft. Billy had asked on a few occasions if it was possible for them to like pose the craft around known objects, because by that point scientists, of course, were, you know, challenging his photos, wanting to know about them. And so Billy asked them if they could move the craft close to a known object, like a tree that was known in the neighborhood, which he did, which they did. And we've got a couple of shots here, I believe, of the craft going around and around this tree. I've only got a couple here today, but there's actually quite a few shots in this series. There's about, I think, 9 or 10 of them. And along with that, he did take some movie film also of the craft moving around this tree. Now notice this craft is slightly different. It has a little different cupola, which is what we call the center area of the ship, and the unusual edges around the craft. The pictures we saw of the first craft, of the smoother flying saucer type craft, has interdimensional capabilities. This craft also has time travel capabilities. So if you see one of these and have the opportunity, you might want to request that they take you for a ride in time. Right. Something that still sounds really amazing to us, but as we understand more and more about the matrix of the universe, it's probably not near as astounding, you know, as we think. It hasn't been that long ago here on Earth, we were just sailing boats from Europe to America. Exactly. We didn't come up with faster boats, we invented the airplane. And then we had a breakthrough, we came up with jets. So we are on the verge of some other major breakthroughs in technology, and traveling around the universe then will not seem so, you know, preposterous. This is, of course, all of Billy's pictures were put into the photo lab, quite a few of them, I mean, to test them out in case they were fakes, whatever. And this is how they do it. This is a blow-up here, pixel by pixel blow-up, done in the computer of one of Billy's pictures. And here the computer has filled everything in so that they can very clearly see the craft and analyze it. They also discovered the fact that these craft put off a form of field energy, which is detectable in the ultraviolet radiation spectrum. So if you're out there thinking of making a fake UFO picture, we can figure them out today, because your fake little model better put off a gravitational field, or we'll be able to detect that. Yeah, that's the real true test. Here we have 2 regular craft and then 2 smaller ones. Those 2 smaller ones are remote craft. They're sometimes called telemeters. And they apparently have hundreds of these small remote discs. They're around the planet all the time. Robert, this is how they listen to our ideas. Apparently what they're doing is they're studying us from more of a spiritual viewpoint. They're fascinated with listening to our material mind, create our logical conclusions, and how our spiritual self listens to that.
Wow. So basically a telemeter ship would be an unmanned craft.
It's an unmanned craft that sends out visions and ideas that people pick up.
Wow.
They have been very clear that maybe as many as 20,000, 30,000 people at any given time might be picking up visions and ideas in their sleep and in their meditation. They want to catch people when your thinking is clear, when we're not driven by ego and other emotions, you know, that drive us during the day. They want us to be clear and open in our thinking when they do these. So these small telemeters broadcast these visions and ideas. People pick them up. They listen to our conclusions, and they are basically examining us at a spiritual level.
Sure.
Yeah. I think we've got a couple more here. Oh yeah, Meier's original photo sessions lasted 75 and 76, and then in October of 78, the contacts kind of came to an end. They decided that that was enough, that it no longer suited their interests, so they stopped them. And then in 1981, they came by and they had this new craft, and they offered to let Billy take some photos of it. Now this craft is what's called a matter displacement device. Does not have a normal propulsion system in any way, shape, or form that we understand. It apparently has the ability, and here it is coming in right behind the house, it has the ability to literally convert itself into what are called fine matter particles and displace itself, reappearing anywhere within the galaxy.
Wow.
It just blinks out and blinks in. By the way, Robert, I'm real familiar with this scene right here because that little van right there.
That's where you stayed.
That was my bedroom, yeah.
That's your house.
Yeah, I slept in that for months right behind Billy's place there.
Wow.
And you can see it. Unfortunately, I wasn't there the day that this craft came in and came over the van, but that was a pretty exciting time.
Wow. Remarkable. Simply remarkable.
You know, Billy took the best UFO photos we've ever seen. He really put the UFO community up on their ear and made everybody pay attention. He's kind of the father, like you mentioned, of all UFO cases. And even though these pictures were taken 20 years ago, we so far have not found anybody else that's had the level of contact and measure of proofs that have been provided by the Meier case. I was in Florida. Here's some new photos. I was in Florida about a year and a half ago, and after a talk, a man came up to me, told me his name was Adrien, said that he'd been having contacts with the Pleiadians, and began to show me photos from his photo album. Now, his contacts are not as extensive as the Billy Meier situation, but as you can see from some of these pictures, they're very similar. And he says that he's had contacts with them for several years, that they are not the same group of Pleiadians that Meier has had contact with, that they are from another star system called Alcyone. Now, Alcyone, by the way, is the brightest star of the Pleiades. That's the central sun of the Pleiades. That's the sun that we revolve around, that Earth and our system revolve around. This picture may be familiar to a lot of our viewers. This is a telemeter or remote ship. I call them pie pans because they look like a pie pan you could throw up in the air. And the crafts are also seen down around Mexico City. There are literally hundreds of people down there to see the small pie pan shapes circling around the volcanoes. Here's a beam ship. Now this one is a little unique. Right down at the bottom of the picture, you can just see the head of the contact man.
Right.
He's gone outside of Miami where he lives to a location they've led him to, and craft is coming in. You can see it in the top of the picture. It's not often we get a photo of a person going out for a contact.
Right.
Here's one up in the clouds. He's in a craft. I looked out the window and saw one next to him. By the way, this picture, because it was in the clouds, I thought was a very exciting one to have analyzed. We have the original negative for this picture. It's been analyzed by Donald Selwyn, who was a NASA consultant, and gave it a very good clean bill of health. He was able on the negative to detect the magnetic fields coming off the craft, and said this is definitely a real photo of some flying metal object up there. This one's quite unique. We hear reports occasionally of people saying the crafts become invisible or they change shape, but we've never really seen any photo proof that might help us believe that, and here we do. If you look closely at this, you can see the clouds through the ship. What is happening here is, it's explained by Adrien, the man in Miami, that these crafts have the ability to power the field up around them, the field of energy that encompasses the craft. And once the field of energy is fired up to a certain resonance or a certain harmonic, which we don't understand yet, it seems to distort light. The craft is still sitting there in solid form, but we can't see it. It looks invisible to us. We can look right through it. And he took this picture with a Polaroid, and because the lens is slow on a Polaroid, it's a little cheap camera that operates at a 1/30th of a second, just as he took the picture, the craft was disappearing and we can see the clouds right through it.
Remarkable. Wonderful.
Yeah. Here's where he lives in Miami, and he's taken this photo off the balcony of his home, right in the back. It seems to be common for them to come around his home and send him information telepathically. And he'll stand out there on his patio taking notes on his clipboard, and at the end of a session they'll sometimes say, well, if you'd like to get a picture, here's your chance. He grabs the camera, and as you can see there, you got a pretty good shot.
Wow.
To me, what's is exciting is the fact that these are very similar to the same pictures that Meier took.
Right.
Same type of craft, very similar.
There's a consistency there.
Yeah. 20 years later, somebody else seems to be getting pictures very similar. This is his patio in Miami, where he gets his education. He's taking the pictures through the bars on the patio. You can just barely make out that there are 4 discs looming out there. He was far enough back from the patio bars that it seemed to throw the exposure off, so he took another one a little closer.
Wow.
And here you can see them. Here we've got 3. There was actually 4. There's a 4th one on the left side, and he snapped a couple of pictures after that, and there were 9 of them there in a V formation. So here we have 3 crafts which are clearly in view in broad daylight right in the middle of Miami. So there we have a pretty good photo display of some flying discs.
Some of the best I've ever seen, without a doubt. Yeah, I think you can find this in the wonderful video that you have also available, the Miami Contacts.
The Miami Contacts is a report on the new photos coming out of Miami. And if you don't mind me touting my own taper, we won the EB Award this year. This is
the EB Award.
We were voted the best UFO documentary of 1995, really based on the photos that are in there. You know, anybody who's interested in seeing the latest in the Pleiadian beam ship photos, the ones that we've just shown are on there, as well as quite a few more, and there's some very good video footage on there too, live video of the craft right behind his house. So, you know, if anybody's interested, pick up a copy.
I have a copy, and I've got to say that this is one of the finest tapes that I've seen in a long, long time. It's very exciting. It's a little over, what, an hour, hour and a half long?
It's 55 minutes. I make them 55 minutes so people can show them on television.
Right.
Because most of the reason for making these is education, to let people know what's going on.
Right.
So we try to make them so cable stations all over the place. And by the way, if you're out there listening and you are a cable station, you got a copy of the tape, run it. It's fine.
Great.
And you got our permission because we want to educate people.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure all of our viewers out there at KMVT here tuning in are very excited about that for sure. What about the spiritual ramifications for Earth? We seem to be seeing the more and more visitations from the Pleiadians. What's ahead for planet Earth? What's the agenda for Earth as far as our spirituality and our growth? They have an involvement in that. There seems to be what a lot of people are using the term integration process, that they seem to be integrating into people's lives in one form or another on the spiritual plane. What's ahead for us? What's on their agenda?
Well, it appears after watching them for 20 years that what's going on, and see, they seem to have technical abilities, so they can see the future, where we're going, and they understand us a lot better than we understand ourselves. Imagine, Robert, if we had one of their crafts for the afternoon that they loaned us, and hopefully with it comes the user's manual so we know how to use the darn thing. And we lift up on our craft and fly up in orbit around Earth, and we look into the manual and see that we have the ability to scan the thought processes of an individual or a group or of the whole planet. And we can read people's thoughts and see what's going on deep within themselves. So we turn the device on, and there's a screen comes on, and we can focus down on any particular individual and listen to who this person's thinking. We can also scan and listen to the accumulated wisdom that that person has had throughout his many lifetimes. They say reincarnation is an exact science, and we'll catch on to it eventually, and then we'll be able to understand more and more about our life. Apparently what's going on is they've looked ahead and seen where we're going in the near future. Actually, just by watching the evening news these days, you can kind of see where we're going the next few years. We have a lot of serious problems to iron out. Economically, politically, socially, all of our paradigms are going to come apart. We're going to have to build new ones, put them back together. We're going to have to come together as a planet. We are seriously overpopulated. There is over 5,400,000,000 people alive right now, the vast majority of which take no responsibility for their thoughts of actions. They're just being led around like sheep by power organizations. In our future, within the next 10, 15 years, obviously our biggest problem is going to be making the transition over into learning to live together with so many different paradigms of thought and thinking. And that's a bigger problem than most people really realize, because we have 168 nations in the United Nations. None of them are really wanting to let go of their power and control.
Right.
We don't see the Chinese being willing to come forward and grow and learn with the Hong Kong situation. They're going to take over Hong Kong next year, and all they see is the ability to get something. They're not looking at it like any sort of advancement where they could progress their governmental system. No, we got serious problems really with power groups on this planet.
Sure.
The world is run by a very small percentage, a handful of wealthy, powerful people who want it to go their way. And that's primarily the economic, material way. So we're running right into a brick wall where the material realm is going to have problems, and there's a small percentage of people on the planet now have had kind of a spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that are seeing the world in a whole new way. You see, we have a small handful who look at our future as a very hopeful, bright, wonderful thing that's beginning to happen. It's a very hopeful, positive time where we can come up with new inventions, new ideas. But then you have the vast majority of people who see all these, this increasing, speeding future that's racing towards us as just kind of a chaotic time of problems. So I think what's going to happen, like in most historic things, a very small percentage of the people are going to become enlightened, have new bright ideas that will lead us into the future. They're going to go out and do their ideas, and everybody else is just going to kind of follow.
Right. Well, I think you point out in your book also that we have to get over our differences as a human race and get over this idea of trying to get ahead at the expense of the next guy.
That's a big one, isn't it?
That's a real big one, and the Pleiadians have been constantly seem to be saying to us that we've got to learn to coexist in a more harmonious way, not consider anyone any less because they're a different color or whatever, but in fact learn that we are all one. And that's really the oldest teaching of any kind of spiritual scripture, I think.
You know, there's a simple little, not a trick, a simple little thing everybody can do with their spiritual self. Many people are not aware that they have a spiritual side, but they do. If you, to all of our viewers out there, here's something you can try. Go out to a park or any public place tomorrow, anytime you want to. Sit down on a bench, get yourself in a nice, comfortable spot. Take 2 or 3 very good, deep breaths and calm yourself down. And let your mind go blank. Try to, for about 10 seconds, not think of anything. And once you can calm yourself down to that point, train your eyes and fixate on any other individual that you choose. And do not let any thoughts come into your mind. If you can do this for about 10, 15 seconds where you draw no conclusions, no value judgments, don't let any emotions come into play, don't draw any conclusions about the individual you're looking at, you will be surprised that within just a few seconds, your spiritual self will make a connection with the spirit of that other individual. And neither one of you will be aware that physically that this is going on. And suddenly, spiritually, you will make a connection and a bond with that other person. Now, the spiritual self cannot be sick, cannot be ill, cannot contain any form of hatred or anger. You will make a connection with that other individual, kind of a spiritual bonding that you could never be mad at each other. You could never be unhappy with each other. Most people aren't aware that that's really possible, and they should try it.
Right. Well, I think what you point out here also that's very exciting in your book, you point out there's a specific area. It says, enter new realms of consciousness and discover how to connect with creation. And that's really what you're saying here.
Well, it is. The people in the East have known about it for a long time, but we're a little stagnant here in the West. We're a little behind spiritually here in our country. And people need to learn really more about the mechanism of what spirit or soul really is.
Right.
It's not taught anywhere. Most of our basic religions don't understand it and really don't have a clue. But people really need to learn more about that. We are not going to advance as a society or as a civilization being noisy, loud, angry, materialistic people. It isn't going to go any farther.
Right.
We're just going to go to war and kill each other. And when all the angry people have shot each other up, and when the dust clears, the more spiritual-minded, clear, balanced thinking people will clear the dust and build a new kind of society.
Right.
That's just about what's going to happen, I think.
I think that that's what they've been kind of saying in what they call the ascension. There's many terms and many ideas of what this phenomenon represents. I like to think of it and sum it up as that we're going to be birthed into the big picture. We're going to be made a part of everything. And wouldn't that be the ultimate goal of humanity? I don't think God had it in mind for us to be just confined to the earth in this way, but rather was when we are perhaps worthy or ready consciously, that we could be a part of all of creation and all of the stars. It literally says that in the Bible, the Gita, even in the pyramids, there are hieroglyphics that make note of the fact that man is made a part of the universe at some point and is walking amongst, as the Bible says, the angels, or walking amongst, of course, our other celestial brothers and sisters, the Pleiadians.
Well, we are part of creation, and most people just aren't aware of it. If they take a vacation, for instance, and travel to the east and take a class in any kind of meditation, quickly within a few days they'll show you some basic meditative practices that allow people to get in touch with that.
Right.
You know, we are in touch and are part of creation all the time. People just don't use the mechanism. And if they want to take just a little bit of time to calm down and read a basic book, well, I put one whole chapter in the book on the basic principles of meditation and what it is, just so people will discover it's not a scary, strange thing. You don't have to, conform to any religion or belief structure. It's just a simple little utility program for the mind that calms you down.
Sure.
And once you calm down the physical, your spiritual automatically comes forward. So it's really nothing more than a relaxation technique. And once you are relaxed, your spiritual self comes forward. You get in touch with yourself. Fear dissipates. You can't be afraid of anything once you get spiritually in balance. Emotionally, people calm down. They get luckier. Luck is the self-inflicted state caused by just doing things for the right reasons. And then you stay out of the way and just let it continue.
Right.
Try not to stop it.
It seems to me that prayer is speaking to God and meditation is listening to God. And that's where we've missed the boat, certainly in Western civilization. Meditation is not encouraged enough. They encourage prayer pray to God, pray to the spiritual source, your angelic guides or whatever it might be, and ask for assistance, wisdom, awareness, some illumination on a particular issue. But we really are not taught enough to sit quietly and listen to what's coming back. We kind of automatically assume that the prayers will be taken care of and everything in some supernatural form, but aren't really, like you say, quieting the mind and allowing the Spirit to move through us and actually answer us in some degree.
Well, this is why we are not ready really for contact with extraterrestrials. They are far older than us, have much more spiritual knowledge, and they're existing more in a spiritual existence. And they come down here, I'm sure, and hear all of our noisy material minds, and they go, well, we're not ready to be part of this. We have a little educating and growing up to do before the family of man out there is really ready to accept us, So I think it's going to be a few hundred years probably before we're having open commerce with very old and very spiritual races like the Pleiadians. It's going to be a very slow transition. We got to get our own house in order first. We don't even have a plan for America. We're getting ready to go into a new election as we're sitting here.
That's a big argument, yeah.
And we don't. You can ask any American on the street, what do we stand for and where are we going with the country? And they're all going to go, oh, well, I don't know. Is there a plan?
Yeah.
Well, there is not a plan on purpose. Politicians don't want to have one because that means they have to stick to something.
Yeah.
Even if you go back one election and listen to all of the videotape of Clinton, for instance, all the things that he was going to change and all the promises that he was going to make, you'll find out all he really did was go around following Perot, and every time Perot said something that was popular, he adopted it, and he got into office because, Perot was too much of a wildcat for a lot of people to vote for. So now he's got in office, 4 years have gone by, nothing has happened, he's done none of the things that he was talking about, a few minor little changes like putting a Band-Aid on a big wound, but nothing has really happened. And we do this cycle after cycle after cycle. So they don't want any big plan. There is no clear vision where our country is going.
Yeah.
And that's really missing in our leadership. And I think for that reason, this may be the last time we have an election like this.
Yeah, you've said that in your lecture series, and I had to agree 100% because it seems in some ways that this system does have to collapse in one form or another to make room for the new. And that's why I think more and more, if you listen to the mystics and the spiritual teachers, and even science and researchers and political scientists are all saying that something drastic is probably going to take place because we're not making the decisions that we should. And so there's probably going to be a falling away of the old and an ushering in of the new. And I really feel that this has largely an extraterrestrial story behind this, because at some point we're going to be brought some wisdom that we haven't thought of before. And I think that's maybe why we're seeing so much testimonial of perhaps the extraterrestrial visitors. We have the crop circles, we have many flybys now, we have the stories that are coming out of various people being taken aboard and shown various wisdoms and everything. I think it's really showing us that really the extraterrestrials are moving in one form or another, even through television commercials now and the big motion pictures like Independence Day, for one reason. Perhaps it's just to get you used to the idea. Just to get you used to the idea that maybe our answers are not only going to come from ourselves, but are going to be merged here with another culture.
Well, it's pretty clear that the future is ours to create. If people in America want to live in the kind of country that they want, they're going to have to someday admit to themselves they're going to have to get up off their chair and take part in it. You know, we can't just sit back and let somebody else take care of it. We can't depend upon a politician or a political party to solve our problems. They're not in that business. They're in the business of control and power for their party. They're not in the business, really, of solving our problems. We are living in a very fast-paced, technical society. Look how it's advanced in 200 years. Our forefathers, when they built this country, when they put it together and conceived our Constitution and created the foundation for what we've got here, I'm sure could barely conceive of the way that we're living today with the complexity of our technology and our communications. And we are really ready for a rewrite on how we live and how we manage things. We have pushed it so far that we are no longer responsible with all the breakthroughs that are coming down the pike. And it's time for all of us, all Americans, to sit down and re-examine how we literally control our country. We are not managing our society well. So I think it's really time, and I suggested that at the end of the book, it's time for a new vision for our country. We need to rewrite the way our government works, the way the people are involved with government, and how we really handle it. We've fallen into a trap of doing everything through economic control. And it's not the bankers' fault, they just kind of got away with it. Over the past 100 years or so, we've depended on economics so much, it made everything revolve around the dollar. And now we've got so deep in debt that everything is controlled by money.
Right.
Our educational system is controlled, our agriculture. Look at our health. 34% of our budget every year is spent on health, and still we're sick. Sure. All the time.
Sure.
We've been fighting cancer for, what, 70, 80 years in this country. We've spent untold trillions of dollars putting money into it, and we still have gained nothing. Only 11% of the people are cured cancer by traditional means, and we're not getting anywhere. So the money system is not working. Most importantly, the quality of our life in this country is not increasing. So it needs to be changed over, I think, to a better system. And why don't you and I change that?
Well, we're on our way to change that, hopefully, and I think you can find a lot of your answers right here in the Pleiadian mission here, a time of awareness, and certainly this is filled with a lot of awareness. When I looked at this book and I read it for the first couple of weeks, and I thought to myself, this is a man who's perhaps a pioneer ahead of his time. He's perhaps right on time. I found it startling and very, very insightful in its wisdoms and its intelligences of what it was bringing through as far as what it can do to help us on the spiritual plane. It mentions a little bit about our political structure, history of the world, who the Pleiadians are, and really where we're headed. I think it's very, very exciting. I highly recommend all of you viewers out there watching KMVT to tune in and order a copy of the book. And you can order a copy of the book here if you'd like to contact Randolph Winters. You can contact him at P.O. Box 1270, and that's in Rancho Mirage, California, and that's 92270. Or you can also order the book by calling 800-934-6423, or you can fax him certainly at 619-770-9720, or of course email him. And without a doubt, I think they're going to find some very, very neat things that you have. You also have your videotape, you have audio tapes, you have the book. You also have, you sell the book, the Talmud of Emmanuel.
Yeah, we have that. It's published by Blue Water Press, and religion is one of the concepts and paradigms that people need to start talking about. And when we go to the table to discuss anything, you need to be well armed with some education.
Right.
So that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate people as much as possible so we can all get together and create the kind of future that we want.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct. More and more of what I hear you say, I'd have to say that the difference between success and failure is the awareness and wisdom in between, and certainly your book is bringing that information, that's bringing the wisdom in between. If you'd like to write us here at KMVT Channel 6 at Space Cities,
P.O. Box 487, Mountain View, California, 94042. Thank you very much for watching, and keep those cards and letters coming.
and without a doubt, Randolph, it has been more than a pleasure of you being on our show here, and I think that we've had a wealth of information here, certainly the most startling photographs I've ever seen, and you've ever seen probably too. And real quickly, you also have your retreat coming up. Can you just tell us in 30 seconds what that's about?
Well, we do. I'm concerned that people have access to the spiritual information. So during my time being able to spend with Billy Meier, I found out there was an immense amount of knowledge about life. So we started a 2-day retreat that's going on, and people can call for information. The 2 days will be spent really on the spiritual lessons, understanding more about life, what life is all about, what a universe really is. And I think the more important part is to aid people in the understanding of how to discover more about themselves, to find those parts in themselves, their spiritual subconscious, their spiritual consciousness, which helps us learn, and our connection to creation. And we want to show people how to meditate, how to discover their spirit, how to make use of their own spiritual self, so they not only have access to the knowledge of creation, but they have access to the accumulated knowledge that they themselves have earned going through their lifetimes, which gives them a better understanding of who they really are and why they're acting the way that they are. So our 2-day retreat really is kind of like a spiritual school. And we're just starting them, and people, of course, if they're interested in that sort of thing, please write or call, and we'll send them itinerary, and hopefully they'll come on down.
Great, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you very much for being on
Thanks,
Space
Robert.
Cities. It was a real privilege, and we'll look forward to seeing you all tune in here at KMVT Channel 6 for Space Cities in our future shows, and stay tuned, and don't forget, get the Pleiadian Mission, A Time of Awareness by Randolph Winters. We'll see you real soon. Good night.